Technology communities consist of, at minimum, a group of people who help each other. A lot of that help comes through the form of asking and answering questions. I've got Ale Murray and Robin Moffatt back on the show today, both returning guests and coworkers, to talk about community building and in particular, effective Q&A and how to make that work, and Slack and forums and trolls and all that kind of stuff. Listen in, these are two great experts to hear from on today's episode of Streaming Audio, a podcast about Kafka, Confluent, and the cloud. Hello and welcome to another episode of Streaming Audio. I am very happy today to be joined by my friends and coworkers, Robin Moffatt and Ale Murray. Robin and Ale, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
We're going to be talking about how to engage a community today. So this is one of those episodes that is less, let's tear into how Kafka works or how the cloud works or something like that, but and more a little bit, I think, a peek under the hood of how a developer relations engine and team functions. And that's why you guys are here, because you work on this team. So for anybody who's new to the show, I mean, you're both returning guests. As I like to say, on your part, that's the triumph of hope over experience. But for anybody who's new to the show, doesn't know who you are, Ale, tell us about yourself.
Yes, so I manage the community globally at Confluent. Basically, that means that I run the strategies that help us to create platforms to engage with the community. So that's why I'm here.
Excellent. Robin.
I'm a developer advocate here at Confluent. So I do a bunch of stuff working with developers directly. And I've also done a ton of stuff in the back end on like our community platforms, working closely with Ali on that.
Yes. Yeah. So you might know, if you've ever been to a meetup, I mean, you've or used Slack or any of these things. I mean, you've touched the work of Ale's team. So there's a lot of the human beings on planet Earth who do things with Kafka, who would care about this show, have intersected with Ale's team's work. And again, many of you, if you're listening to this show, you probably know Robin's name. You've probably watched videos of him on YouTube explaining how things in KSQL DB or Kafka Connect work or something like that. He is certainly the guy I ask when I'm trying to get Kafka Connect to do something, and trying to get KSQL DB to do something slightly more interesting than sort of the basics. So these are, you should not at all be surprised if you have heard of these folks, but if you haven't, now you have, and I'm glad that we're here. So, Ale, we've talked in a previous episode, which we'll link in the show notes. In fact, I'll try to link all your previous appearances in the show notes. But we've talked in a previous episode about what community is, but just as a reminder, what do you mean when you say community, and what are the basic elements of a program like the one that you run?
Yeah, sure. So when we mean community, or when we say community, what we mean is pretty much everyone that touches the technology in any way that is related to technology. So whether you are customer, or whether you are an open source user, or just like a person who is in university, or just someone who's interested in the technology, everyone who touches the technology is part of the community. But what we really mean about that is a group of people who are interested in the same software, and in this case, Apache Kafka. And we would love for them to come together, to learn together, to discuss about their use cases, about their problems, or the things that they're solving with the technology, and help each other. So really, even though by community we mean everyone who is engaged with the technology, we really mean people who are coming together because they have this common interest. And for the second part of your question, what this program, what basically the components that that form the community strategy, I like having them explained in 5 different pillars. So I have the Meetups pillar, which is what you might know as a meetup is just an event that is purely educational, sales free, where people go to learn, to network, to talk about the technology with other people, but mainly just learn how to do things with the technology. We have the conferences pillar, which also comprises of the speakers component. And basically what that is we like building up speakers that go to speak at conferences, go to speak at meetups, and so on. But also, obviously, we like knowing which conferences we're good to go to speak at, and which are going to be the most benefit for the community. Where are we going to find the most community members for that conference to be successful? And then we also have MVPs, who we call the catalysts, and we have the hackathons pillar and the digital platforms one, which is pretty much right now everything, like all the community owned channels, like GitHub and Stack Overflow and all these places, Reddit, Twitter. But we own the digital platforms like Slack, the community Slack, the Confluent Community Slack, and we own the Confluent Community Forum. So those are our two community platforms. So that's pretty much all the components in the strategy.
There you go. And by the way, this being a kind of a theory of DevRel episode, if you're a person who is building a DevRel team, or a founder at a new company, and you're thinking about that, just go ahead and rewind and play that part back and take some notes, because it's what you want to do. It's sort of a growth industry, what we do, and this way of helping businesses grow and services become more widely adopted. Well, these are things that developers use, and so helping other people like ourselves succeed at using them is a key thing. So that was great stuff. Thank you, Ollie, for summarizing that. And I think we went over a lot of that in more detail on one of your previous episodes. So to summarize, a community, if I could summarize in my words what you said, I think it's a group of people that are centered around a technology community, centered around some technology. In this case, it's Kafka. And we as Confluent care a lot about Kafka and people just being good at it. And of course, we've got other things like our fully managed Kafka offering, Confluent Cloud, that we care about. But the community isn't defined by people who use Confluent Cloud or people who are customers. It's centered around this notion of all the people who build things with Kafka in some sense. And it's this mutually self-supporting, helping group of people who know each other. That's what makes it a community. Otherwise, it's it's a property it's a statistical property of a group of people. For it to be a community, they have to help each other. And those last two, you talked about digital platforms in your final pillar, and the last two things you mentioned, Slack and Confluent, are one way for people to do that helping, frankly, to ask questions, right? And get answers, particularly in the last year with in-person interaction being a little bit of a problem during the pandemic. Those have been key. So, and those happen to be areas where Robin is super active. That's one of the big reasons you're here, Robin. The idea of getting questions answered. So you do a lot of that question answering. You've done a lot of it in Slack. You do a lot of it in the forum now. There might be folks listening who don't even know we have a forum. Probably a lot of people know we have a Slack workspace, because if you're listening to this, you're probably in it. Obviously, there will be links in the show notes to both if you don't. But asking questions, getting answers, you do it a lot, Robin. So just kind of riff on that. What's a good question? What's a good answer? How does that work well? How does it work poorly?
Yeah, so that's a good question, as it were. I mean, the best kind of...
I am, after all,
Well, indeed. That's why you get the big bucks. I think the difference between like a vibrant community is one where people are respectful in their questions that they ask and the answers that they give, versus people seeing it as just a free resource for like, I've got this project I've been chucked onto. I'm going to chuck out a question. I'm not put much thought into it, and I'll hope for an answer. I might even demand an answer, say it's urgent. And then someone like chucks an answer, and then they go. And that's not like a great way for things to go, because people probably aren't going to help answer the question if it's not particularly well formed. So the kind of things that make a good question are where you actually take the time to explain what you're doing. And ironically enough, if you take the time to do that, a lot of the time you actually solve your problem. It's called the rubber duck idea. And I do it all the time. I like going to our internal Slack and go and ask someone something, and as I'm typing it out, it's like, yeah, I didn't check that thing. So writing a great question can actually help you get the answer yourself. But doing things like explaining why you're trying to do it. So a bad way would be like, how do I set this? Or how do I get this to here? A good way would be like, I'm trying to build this thing. I want to get some data from here to do this. That I can do this with it. How can I do that? Or I've tried this and I've got this particular error message. Because then people may be able to say, well, you connect these things together like this, but you don't actually want to do it that way, because what you're trying to do is do this with this. So actually what you want to do it is a different way. So people sometimes fast forward through what they assume, and particularly if people are new to these things, they may only see one way of doing it, so they'll ask actually the wrong question. So the background helps an awful lot.
It's like if you come in and you say, "Where's the honey? I need the honey," and they're like, "Well, we don't have any honey." This goes to a nursery rhyme type poem from when I was a boy. It was, "I eat my peas with honey. I've done it all my life. It may sound kind of funny,
on the knife,
but it keeps them on the knife." And okay, so that's known in the UK.
Yeah.
Nobody else in the US seems to know this, but well, maybe you should use a spoon. And real quick, I want to stop on rubber duck, because there might be people who don't know. And Ale, maybe you may be wondering why we're talking about our bath toys. The point Robin was making is that in the process of asking a good question, whether to another person in spoken words or typing it out well and formulating it well, that forces you to think through things in a systematic way. And so you might as well have a rubber duck on your monitor and just ask the rubber duck the question, because it's your own cognitive process of forming the question that brings the insight. It's not an answer. And so
it's that thing of actually verbalizing.
You don't know that.
Of actually articulating it, whether in written form or verbally. It's actually going through, what is it I'm trying to do, or what have I done? That's, if you you sit and stare at the screen for like 2 hours, it's like, I'm sure I've tried everything. I'm sure I've tried these things, but actually writing it out or speaking it out is what helps.
Yeah, or going to the next cubicle and saying, "Hey, this," and by the time you're done with the question, oh, never mind, I got it. Always happens, right? So help, this is broken is a terrible question, but putting yourself through the work of, and I put terrible expectations on myself when I go to ask questions in forums. I'm like, no, this has to be all bulletproof, and so I make it more costly than it needs to be. But the good thing about that is, I run myself through the ringer, and I do that thinking. So,
and it's also respectful as well. If you're going to a community and you're hoping for people to help you for free, then the least you can do is be respectful of their time and make it easy to understand what it is you're actually trying to do. So rocking up to a community and pasting a screenshot of an error with no context around it and saying it's broken, what's the problem? It's like, you're not even trying here. You're asking for these people to help you, and so it's a matter of respect as well. There's a link. I'll make sure we get it in the show notes. When I go to Chrome, I just type in catb. I can't remember the full URL, but it's called "How to Ask Questions the Smart Way," and it's actually from many years ago. But the advice just stands. It's things like, don't guess at what the problem is. Explain what you're trying to do. Show what the versions are, how you've installed it, all this kind of stuff. Because computers are only getting more and more complicated, and they're distributed and all the rest of it. So those kind of things matter. Are you running it in Docker? Is it a local thing? Is it up in the cloud somewhere? All these kind of things form part of a good question, and let people give you kind of more helpful answers.
Nice. I want to ask about answering questions, but a question has occurred to me. I kind of want to bounce something back to Ale. So Robin, I'll come back to you in a second. How about the kindness of a community? Because this is a thing that some people are afraid to come. Number one, there's the poorly thought out question where you haven't done the work yourself that probably would have been rewarding in your own problem solving process to formulate a good question, and you just kind of dump whoa, this is broken, stack trace, and that's disrespectful of the people that are offering you free expertise, and it short circuits your own process. But then there are communities that don't make it safe to ask questions, and where they're if it's too simple of a question, you could get some abuse for that, or there could just be trolling in the community. So, Ollie, where do we stand there, and how do you handle? Do you have a lot of practice handling trolls, and how do we do that?
Yes, that's a great question. So we part from the principle that we have a global community and there are a lot of cultures and a lot of languages, and everyone's making an effort to communicate in one language. In this case, is English. So we part from the principle of understanding that there might be a lot of things lost in translation, and that we need to be kind and empathetic towards people that are making an effort to speak a different language and communicate in to a different culture, or to many different cultures, because we are a global community, as I just mentioned. So that's one thing that I like keeping in mind. I mean, just in this call, we are from 3 completely different cultures and different countries, and different languages, at least one different language. So
arguably 1.5.
1.5, yeah. So I think that's something that's very important to keep in mind. And another thing that we like keeping in mind, and by the way, not only keeping in mind, but every opportunity we have to remind people of that, we take it. And another thing that we like reminding people about is that they're what Robin just mentioned, that if you're waiting or expecting for someone to help you, all you can ask, or the least you can ask for from someone, is to be kind and to be respectful of the way they ask, and also the time that person is taking in answering your question. This is completely free, accessible to everyone, and most of the people understand that. And then there are the times where you find the odd troll or the odd person that doesn't understand that, or that expects everything. But at, at those times, we also like to remember that there are human beings behind a screen. And people forget that a lot, particularly when we're behind the screen all day, every day, and all of us are, and particularly after this last year. So it's also a good reminder to people to understand that, or to remember that we are all behind the screen. Behind the screen, we're all human beings. And one way we like doing that as well is that when someone is not being very nice or very kind, we tend to DM them, so direct message them and ask them kindly. And then suddenly the response is unbelievable. Once you start trolling someone back on a public forum, it's a never-ending process, and that creates more trolling from other people. Other people start getting involved, and it just suddenly starts to escalate to never-ending never-ending proportions. But when you understand that they are human beings, and go and direct message them and say, hey, like, I know you were trying your best, but would you mind being a little bit kinder? These people are trying to help you, or that's not really great. Would you mind not posting that again? That's a little bit spammy. Everyone here is trying to get something done. 99% of the time, I've gotten a good response from that. And I think it's because of that, because people suddenly realize, oh, they remember I'm a human being. When we don't remember they're human beings, it's super easy to escalate. So that's one of the things.
Every time you DM me, I stop. And I
It's funnily enough, we don't really have many repeated trolls. Once they do it once, they by this method, they suddenly just don't do it again. I am totally against blocking people straight away, because I like giving them the chance, because they are just going to open a new account with a different username and they just keep trolling. But when you actually acknowledge them as human beings, you have way better chance for them to stop. And then the odd 1% that doesn't respond to that, then obviously, well, you have no option, and you block them. But we have, so I always repeat this, that I think I am so lucky. I don't think, I consider myself, I am very lucky, or for working with such a lovely community, and such a healthy community, where we barely have to block people, we barely have any trolls, and the ones we have really understand and really feel seen as human beings, and turn around. And it's been really lovely to work with communities like this, because it hasn't been like that everywhere I've worked, but also from the other people in DevRel that I hear, is not that usual. And I think that also comes from people like Robin, who's here with us, that set an example, and people like you who set an example, and people like Jay and Wen, and like all the people that work and have worked with the community from the very beginning. They have been an example that they have set, and communities grow towards the people they see growing the community. Like, so if we have a toxic community leader, it's going to end up being a toxic community, and thankfully we haven't. So it is a lovely community.
Emphasize what Ali said about the empathy and the cultural side of things, because understanding where people are coming from, both in like, why are they asking this kind of question? Like, to my embarrassment in the past, not in the Confluent, the Kafka community, but in a previous life, I'll have quite often replied to questions with the "let me Google that for you" link. And it wasn't as good a community. People were literally just like, drive by, can you do my job for me? Like, haven't made the blindest bit of effort. But it sinks to the lowest common denominator. It's kind of like, they ask rubbish questions, we give like snarky answers, and no one kind of benefits from that. And so I've followed on from, like Ali says, like the examples from like Gwen and Tim and everyone else in the community. Like, you help people. And if you've got nothing nice to say, don't say it. Like, if you don't want to help someone, don't help them. But lots of people, they're just starting out, they're just learning this thing. And what seems obvious to people who have been using it for a while, or even just like a little bit, it's like, God, couldn't they go and look at this in the doc? So it's the first link on Google. It's like, well, that's great. Give them that link. And then that welcomes them into the community. And like, if they keep on, like, they just want their job done for them, it's like, well, that's actually a very, very small minority of people. Most people actually, they're just dipping their toe in the water of the community. So welcoming them in with not being snarky and rude to them is a really big thing.
It is. So I think you just answered this question, Robin. I was going to ask you to coach the question answerer, because you gave us a good how to ask a question. But what other advice do you have for people like you who are there and you have knowledge and you want to make the community healthier and you want to get people going on whatever it is they're stuck on? What would be your advice to the person who's trying to be good at that, besides what you just said?
I think don't be a smartass. And again, 100% guilty of this in the past. And people aren't there. They don't want to see how clever you are. They want to get help with what they're doing. And it's going to foster a nicer community if people aren't there to kind of like outsmart each other and like a series of threads where like the answer is like, well, actually it's this, or nitpicking a previous answer or something. It's, again, if you've got nothing nice to say, don't say it. If you've got something to kind of like correct, or you see something's different or could be more precise, there are tons of nice ways to say that. And again, I think the cultural thing comes into it, because different cultures they use their language in different ways. And like, I only speak English to my embarrassment. I don't speak any other language. And I've got so much respect for everyone else who's speaking like English as a second or third language. And all this technical stuff, it's like, I can't even like order a beer in like another language. I could probably manage that. But so sometimes when people answer things, they'll be very, very blunt. And maybe that's because they're just being rude. But a lot of the time, it's actually they're writing in another language. So it's just that empathy. Again, it comes back to the empathy and understanding and just giving people a benefit of the doubt. But I think answering the question that people are asking, maybe saying like, are you actually trying to do that? Like, going back to my point about asking a good question and the context for what you're trying to do and what you're trying to achieve. So you can answer a question directly and then say, but by the way, if you're trying to do this, and like maybe second guess a little bit, but politely, have you thought about doing it this way? Or just going back and saying, like, if you've not got enough information to go on, politely and kindly ask for like, well, to let us help you, we need a bit more information and we need to know this kind of stuff, but maybe chuck in a few links like, you've not really given us much to go on here. Can you give us this information? And by the way, check out these few references here, because sometimes that's all that someone needs to get unblocked with it.
Yeah. So not only helping them with the problem, in some cases helping them with the question, because not everybody is that's a skill that you have to learn, asking a good
totally
question.
It's not, and
you're helping them.
People don't always ask a question badly because they're just being awkward and can't be bothered. Sometimes they literally don't know how to ask a good question. They think that the error code is all that's necessary. So actually, I suppose that applies maybe broadly to more junior people who have just started out kind of writing stuff on computers, but understanding how it's kind of like the broad kind of the soft skills of being like a software engineer, of like communicating and being able to articulate what is the problem, what am I trying to do. So helping coach people through that as well.
You've both mentioned language as a thing in online and in-person interactions. And when there's a multi-language situation and you're dealing with a second language speaker, if you detect bluntness, number one, you're probably a fluent or native speaker of the language. Like to get to that level of, well, that was a blunt way to ask that question, then you've got mastery of things in the language that a fluent speaker uses to soften and avoid that kind of thing. And this is not a podcast about language, but there, as an encouragement to go easy on that bluntness evaluation, there are actually some really interesting linguistic explanations of why certain kinds of things sound blunt, and even why in spoken language, certain kinds of grammars from the person's original language will cause them to speak in a way that sounds blunt in English, that have nothing to do with the person's emotional state or their thought about you or themselves or anything. It's like, well, the phonology and the grammar of their language cause them, when they're new at English, to do these things, and you think you're a jerk, but they're not. They're like good linguistic explanations of that. So you really want to go easy on that and realize if you're detecting bluntness, well, good for you, because you're really good at the language you're speaking right now. And maybe they're not. So go
And it's
easy.
also where stuff like emojis come in. Like, they seem sometimes, like, people say they're childish or whatever, but emojis were invented for this reason, just like the colon and the brackets was 50 years ago, however long ago it was. It's that kind of stuff helps convey meaning, and you can like use a sentence without it, and it sounds potentially terse, but you put that on, and it's dead clear exactly what you mean.
Smile with tongue sticking out, and everybody's like, "Oh,
There we
wow,
go.
he's nice." You know.
Yeah, and the tone, right? Like, there's nothing that can just tell you what the tone of voice the person is using to write that language, and that says a lot. I have an example of that, what you just said, Tim. So in Spanish, you say a lot tienes que, and that translates to you have to. And when I say it in English, everyone's like, I don't have to do anything. But it's kind of like a way of explaining. So if you ask me, how do I work this water bottle? Then you say, you have to open it like this. And it just kind of comes harsh. It's like, I
tell me
don't
what
have
to
to
do.
do it.
I'm an American. Do what I want.
So it's funny about that. But something actually that you mentioned at the beginning about what's the definition of community, I think is very linked to this. Because another thing that we need to keep in mind is that everyone in the community was a starter once, a beginner once. So these people who are coming into your community to ask newbie questions, you were one of them before. And a lot of people might say, well, yeah, but then I went and figured it out myself. Well, that's great. Now that means that you paved the way for other people to not have to figure it out themselves. Now you can help them. And that's the very definition of community, is paving the way for others to not have to go through the difficult process that you had to go through to say the same. So the fact that you had a hard time learning that doesn't mean that the person behind you does. It actually means that the person behind you doesn't have to, because you already did. So you're making it easier. And then that actually opens the door for other people to create better solutions with the technology that will end up helping you in return. So it's like you also were a beginner, but also the beginner today might be the person who helps you with your project in the future. So it's just keeping in mind that as well. And that, I think, is what makes a good community, just realizing that.
Those would be great words to end on, and we're kind of at time, but I want to ask one more thing. Slack versus forum. This is a debate we've had here in the last 6 months, and it's a debate other people have. Like everybody's got a Slack workspace. Not everybody has a forum right now. We have a forum. Why? What are your thoughts on the use of those two things? Jump ball, either one of you.
Robin,
I have a strong opinion. I'll let you go first, because I'm the one who was, I was always being awkward about this and saying we should have a forum, and now we have a forum, so I made Ali's life difficult.
No.
I think Slack's great, but for me, it's got some limitations. The kind of like the transient nature of it and the way that stuff gets lost in threads. It's not indexed by Google, so you can't find stuff so easily. And it's also just like, I grew up on, and it shows my age, I grew up on like Usenet and NTP and
Usenet. Say it.
And I grew up on IRC as well. So the kind of like the real-time chat thing works, but they're different things for different purposes. And I don't think either one on its own is sufficient. I think you need both, because different types of developers want different things, and also different types of conversation lend themselves better to different things. So if you've got two people online trying to debug something, and like, if you tried this, if you tried that, that's perfect for something like Slack. Whereas maybe more long form things, or kind of considered discussions, or just like, here's my problem and then here's my answer, what tends to work better in a forum. For me, the specific reason is that it's not lost. One of the big reasons I was pushing to get the forum was that in the Slack, you would have the same kind of questions coming up again and again, and there is search and stuff like that, but with a forum, it's much easier to say, here is the question, here is the answer. You can mark it as a solution, so it shows up as like, this is the actual answer that the person asking the question said, this answers my question. And then you can redirect people to it, and you can say, here is the answer, and it will pop up on Google. And it helps scale the community in terms of people answering and solving questions for others, instead of people ending up saying, like, oh, this is the 100th time I've seen this question, this time I'm not going to answer it. So that was for me kind of like the real drive between the need for a forum.
Yes, and to add to that, at the beginning, the intention we had was to build cross-community collaboration and really and build relationships to really strengthen the community and build a structure for the community to stand on. And we found that possible in Slack. But I think as the community reaches a level of maturity, both from a relationship standpoint, but also from a technical standpoint, then that need for that historical technical platform increases. And I think that's what ended up, driving the decision to, this is the right time and the right moment to do that. If we had done this 3 years ago, we wouldn't have probably built either or. Mm-hmm. So we needed to have that strong base for the communities to stand on, so that now the technical maturity of the community is there for us to be able to have a very vibrant forum as well.
My guests today have been Ali Murray and Robin Moffatt. Ali and Robin, thanks for being a part of Streaming Audio.
Thank you for having us.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks very much.
And there you have it. Thanks for listening to this episode. Now, some important details before you go. Streaming Audio is brought to you by Confluent Developer. That's developer.confluent.io, a website dedicated to helping you learn Kafka, Confluent, and everything in the broader event streaming ecosystem. We've got free video courses, a library of event-driven architecture design patterns, executable tutorials covering KSQLDB, Kafka streams, and core Kafka APIs. There's even an index of episodes of this podcast. So if you take a course on Confluent Developer, you'll have the chance to use Confluent Cloud. When you sign up, use the code PODCAST100 to get an extra $100 of free Confluent Cloud usage. Anyway, as always, I hope this podcast was helpful to you. If you want to discuss it or ask a question, you can always reach out to me at @TLBerglund on Twitter. That's TLBERGLUND. Or you can leave a comment on the YouTube video if you're watching and not just listening, or reach out in our community Slack or forum. Both are linked in the show notes. And while you're at it, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and to this podcast wherever fine podcasts are sold. And if you subscribe through Apple Podcasts, be sure to leave us a review there. That helps other people discover us, which we think is a good thing. So, thanks for your support, and we'll see you next time.